8:40 exactly. Online, we now have researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation, David Van Wyk, and we're going to be looking at how history will remember the last apartheid president, F.W. de Klerk. At his state memorial service yesterday, President Ramaphosa said that while the injustices of the past should not be forgotten, de Klerk played a role in the democratic transition of the country. David, good morning. Welcome to the program. David, are you here? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hello.
Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Good morning. Yes,
Morning,
yes,
good
good morning. Welcome to the program.
Okay.
I presume you heard my introduction?
I did.
Okay. Would you like to respond, please? I'm not quite sure if you can hear me clearly, but I seem to be getting some interruption on my side.
I can hear you very clearly. Yes, I think that in terms of the political elites in South Africa, de Klerk will be remembered as someone who played a major role in the transformation of South Africa. However, this great man theory of history generally tends to write out the role that ordinary people play in history and the contribution of ordinary people to force de Klerk to actually respond to the situation that was there at the time. And his response was not all about transformation and inclusion. Between 1990 and 1994, 14,000 people died. 101 people per month died in this country in a very intense struggle by ordinary people who said that they will no longer accept apartheid, they will no longer accept exclusion, and demanding change. De Klerk's response to that and the response of the National Party government at the time was, on the one hand, to have consultation and engagement and so on, but on the other hand was through violence. We remember the Boy Patong massacre. We remember the murder of Frank Chilisa in Harare. We remember the bombing of Michael Lapsley in Harare. We remember the attack on the Alexander Drive Road in Harare and the Avondale attacks in Harare. We remember the Bishu massacre and so on. So, it was a matter of being pressured all the time. I remember trying to get back into the country in 1990 and not being able to do so until after Mandela threatened mass action to allow refugees to come back into the country. In eventually December of that year, people were allowed to come back. And he was very, very reluctant to actually allow that process of returning people from exile.
Why do you think the reluctance of allowing people to come back to South Africa, people in exile, what was the fear there? And do you think that there was another agenda in the background as far as the National Party was concerned? Did they think that perhaps they could still be in a position of control?
Well, I think that the National Party wanted to negotiate a settlement that would allow its own puppets to win the elections in 1994. So the situation was one of wanting to get people like Buthelezi and Mangope and so on to become national figures and get them through that process to be elected in a process of negotiated settlement that would neutralize the liberation movement. In the end, the ANC won the election, but the ANC was not the only liberation movement. And the ANC won an election in a very compromised situation, and we could see that from the slowness of transformation after 1994 and the lack of transformation even as we speak today. There is still the land question that is outstanding. There is still a severe housing backlog in this country. There is still the biggest inequality on the planet in this country. So the negotiated settlement made it almost impossible for whoever won the election in 1994 to address the key critical social questions and challenges that face this country.
So, into our democracy, we're still sitting with huge issues. The one issue that you've touched on is the land and the housing issue. But just before we answer that, let's look at the mixed reactions from citizens in the country regarding FW de Klerk's foundation, in which the 85-year-old at the time apologized for the damage caused to blacks during the apartheid regime. Why do you think there were such mixed reactions? What did he not say to people that there was this outburst of reaction? What should he have said for people to kind of almost be in a position of acceptance?
Well, I think that the problem for his apology is this. We are living in a country where there is a lack of political accountability. And that lack of political accountability started in 1990 when the negotiations process started. You see, the thing is that politicians are not held accountable for either corruption or for crimes against humanity and so on in this country. They just walk away scot-free. The people who actually got arrested and faced trial and so on were the people who executed the orders from the top. The people at the top just simply smiled and walked away. And de Klerk himself just simply smiled and walked away, And so that apology is not really accepted by people because it's not considered to be a genuine apology. And I'm afraid that in this country, until politicians are held accountable, we are not going to be able to realize, democratic rights in terms of practice. It's all just theoretical at this stage. And so anyone who is a politician knows that they can do all kinds of things and get away with it because we have set the tone in 1994 by not holding senior people accountable for what happened between 1990 and 1994.
Okay, let's look at the land question and housing. And of course, that leads me directly to the third burning issue in our country, and that's the high rate of unemployment. How do we move forward on these very, very burning issues? Because it is only once we get these things, we put these things in order, is there going to be some form of stability and less agitation in the country. And your predictions, look into your crystal ball and tell me, what do you think 2022 is going to look like if these issues are addressed or if not met?
Well, I think that the problem in South Africa is a highly concentrated economy. Although we have many, many mining companies, for example, we have only 5 that dominate all exports and dominate most of the production in mining. In banks, we have about 5 banks that absolutely dominate the financial sector. In retail, we have about 5 retailers that absolutely dominate everything in retail. Same for wholesale and so on. Agriculture is concentrated around agribusiness and so on. And this high concentration of the economy excludes people from participation. And the majority of South Africans in this country are actually just cheap labor who own absolutely nothing. In other words, they own absolutely nothing in the country of which they are nationals, and they are excluded from the economy. And we must also not forget that unemployment is functional. Unemployment sustains a system of cheap labor. And the country cannot get into manufacturing or step up to the next level of development if there is no demand within the country for goods that are produced by factories and so on. And frankly speaking, the wages and so on that people are getting in this country make it impossible for investors in manufacturing and so on. And so the country remains extractive and export driven rather than developing within the country a class of people who are able to actually consume what we are producing and so on. And we are not producing manufactured goods because there's simply no market for it, because there is no income that can sustain it. That reflects the inequality of the country. So it's a concentration of the economy that leads to the inequality, that leads to the unemployment. The unemployment is functional to that. And unless we begin to address the economic base of society, we are not going to change anything. And that is the one thing that we didn't address. Someone said in the media yesterday that we cannot eat the Constitution. We cannot eat the vote. People are hungry, people are unemployed, people are getting increasingly angry. And, the tragedy of COVID-19 is that the mineral prices are at their highest that they've been in a very long time. Gold at the moment is $2,000 an ounce, as is platinum and so on. So the mining companies that dominate the economy, responsible for more than 40% of the exports and more than 45% of the imports into this country, are absolutely creaming it. But we are told that there's an economic crisis in the country and that there's massive unemployment and so on. And that is just because the wealth of the country simply drains away. It doesn't stay in the country. And unless we begin to say that we need to sit down around the economy of this country and say, what do we do to change it, to make it inclusive and make people participate on a mass scale in the economy, we are not going to solve the problems.
Okay, so coming back to FW de Klerk, the National Party, in essence, they were not really, didn't really play an important role in the democratic transition because their hands were tied. People were agitating for change. If they didn't sit down with Nelson Mandela and the ANC and other parties involved, we probably would have seen large-scale bloodshed in the country. Is that how you think history will look back and view these years of our lives?
Well, I don't think that there would have been large-scale bloodshed in the country. If we look at the fall of Mongobe, for example, in March 1994, it took exactly 1 week for his government to collapse, and that happened because people got out into the streets and they said, "We're no longer going to go and work in the civil service. We're no longer going to operate his broadcast center. We are no longer going to make it possible for him to rule." And by the end of the week, he was gone. You see, the thing is that it was a negotiated settlement in 1994 and not a victory for liberation. And so the negotiated settlement meant that those who were fighting for freedom, those who were fighting for liberation, those who were fighting for equality, those who were fighting for the changes to be made that are necessary to be made, had to compromise with those who opposed it. And those who opposed it realized that they can give away political power so long as they retain economic power. They will still remain effectively in power because they will control the resources of the country, as they in fact still do. They still own the land, they still own most of the productive resources and so on in the country and so on, and the majority of people are still excluded. And so consequently, we are having a negotiated settlement that gave us a new apartheid system. People can go to the movies together now, they can sit in restaurants together now, but the majority of people still live in ghettos that were created by apartheid. The spatial arrangements of the country have not changed, as the distribution of wealth and resources and so on also has not changed. And until the people who control those resources and so on actually agree that these things need to be shared instead of concentrated, we are not going anywhere.
David, absolutely fascinating talking to you. We have to have a follow-up conversation regarding land distribution, housing, unemployment, etc. And I know that we're still stuck into that legacy of apartheid, but hopefully we will talk again soon. Thank you indeed for your insights. Go well and have a great day.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
8:54 exactly.